Hey, friend.
Hey, sister girl.
Can you see me well?
I can see you. I see the
Awesome.
hair. I see the hat.
I see you. I'm loving this lipstick.
You
And
tell me.
happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Happy belated Women's Day.
Oh, yes. International Women's Day. Yes, yes. Happy belated. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
You know, right? They're joining us as we kiki. Cause I saw your comment like, don't be nervous. We're just gonna kiki, and that's exactly how.
Listen, that's
That's exactly,
it. This is just
that's
an
exactly
excuse
how
for
this whole
you
thing
and I
came
to
about.
see each other.
I know, right? I know. We were supposed to kiki this weekend, but that was one thing.
But you came through with the flyer and everything because you are a marketing guru. We love to see that. Okay.
Okay. And I was like, yeah, I received it all, most definitely. Like, oh my gosh. And shout out to you. I saw you ranting on the video. Not ranting, but sharing your clips, sharing your thoughts. And every slide, I was like, yes, that's
Yes.
right. And that's true.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I figured we would eventually get on a call. So I'm so glad that you reached out and you were like, let's just go ahead and talk about this on IG Live because
Yeah.
everyone's talking about it. And we also want to engage with the broader, community and what folks are thinking and have a nuanced conversation
Have a
about
new
what this
conversation.
represents.
Because there was no mistake that, this interview dropped on a Sunday evening prime time.
Listen, right
And
before
Queen
International
Oprah.
Women's Day, shout out to Oprah. They had to get the Black billionaire to do it, and she's such a great interviewer. She is.
The queen of media.
Listen, I thought it was interesting how it started out, right? Because she starts
Yeah.
out with, "Okay, this is just so everyone knows, none of this is scripted. Like, this is Meghan just came here, and we're having this conversation." I thought that was an interesting take there. Yeah.
They're obviously cool. I feel like it was like a resurgence of interest for me in this royal family thing. I think for a lot of people, one, when we found out that this Prince Harry guy is dating an American, we found out that was a big deal.
Right.
And we were like, oh, hello. That's a sister? Like, hold on.
Right.
Now we're really paying attention. And I know Oprah was one of their wedding guests. And like you said, like, she's such a great interviewer. Who else could really toe that line of, I don't know, looking at it from my vantage point, I'm like, she does such a good job of being in that space of, a very standard interview, very, journalistic, but she also knows how media works and social media works and how, reactions work in meme culture,
Yeah, and she's so personable. Like, the interviews that Oprah has had over the years, the way people show up in them, it's because she is really able to relate to you on that one-on-one. And I'm so fascinated by Oprah. So I've followed her journey over the years. And there's this podcast. I forget the name of it, but it's focused on people coming out of Chicago. So it highlights Oprah. It also highlights Obama and their journeys over the years. And Oprah is so fascinating to me because she's been able to get a really amazing audience over the years, and many of them being white women. And that is part of how she's gotten to becoming this billionaire that she is today. Really appealing to the suburban women and just appealing to women across the world. So to see that interview, and as you said, having all those connections there, it was the perfect person to have this conversation with in the public.
Yeah, most definitely. Because who else can can relate to both us and our moms and our auntie and them and our little sisters? Yeah, next level. So what you think? Did you watch it live on Sunday?
I did not watch it live, unfortunately. I watched it the next day. Shout out to CBS for having that online and for free. And you have to,
it was really accessible. I was like, okay. Personally,
I read that the ads that ran on there went for $20 million. That's how much was paid towards putting those ads out. Yeah.
I can imagine it was well worth it because I was watching something this morning. There's a new cable news channel. I posted about it on my stories called the Black News Channel. I had never heard about it. But just so happens they had just gone over with this new rebrand. So essentially it's a cable news station from the Black lens. They had a correspondent on there from the UK. He basically said the attendance in the UK of people viewing this interview was the equivalent of like 55 million here.
Wow.
Compared to the actual like 17 million Americans that tuned in. So people were tuned in. They teased it for us. Okay.
Yes. Wow. So that's another lens too. Look at my brother. Hey, bro. Thanks for joining us. um, but yeah, so the lens of like being Black and British and viewing this, it's been fascinating to hear those experiences and stories as well, because we so this issue of racism is universal. We know this, right? Anti-Blackness is everywhere. But then to get the British perspective, I enjoyed hearing those takes from people, because it's still a little different and nuanced.
Yeah, most definitely. Like, what were you hearing that stuck out to you where you were like,
That video that you shared with me of Kelechi, I believe her name is Kelechi, and she has been invited to speak on this issue at a few places. And yeah, she was really doing a great job at weaving it in with history. Let's talk about the monarchy. Let's talk about the British monarchy and how they couldn't accept a biracial woman into their family that their grandson loved, and loves in an active way, as we could see from that interview.
active. He active.
Right? Like, that was beautiful to see.
Right.
And yeah, like, if of course the British monarchy wouldn't be able to accept a biracial woman, because they took over all of these different places of people who are not biracial, right? And how are they able to do that? Through dehumanization. So yeah,
the textbook writers, you know, like being at the center of this entire conversation. And it feels like also like I don't know, that's just a really interesting point. Because I was gonna say, and you let me know what you think about this. This may be too deep, we may get in it later. But one of the questions my sister Stephanie asked this, she was like, you know, what role of Meghan's identity as a mixed race woman, but as a woman who arguably can pass as a white woman, or not, you know, very obviously a Black woman. Let's say in comparison to you or I, there's really no question. If we walk into a room, like, you know what I'm saying? Give a little bit more confirmation around our ancestry. Anyway, Stephanie, you know, posed the question, you know, do you think her lighter skin played a role in, one, there's two layers to this, I think. One, to her, you know, as she mentioned in the interview, you know, she wasn't really aware, and she believed them when they said they would protect her. She was like, oh, okay, I believe it. Do you think her, you know, maybe experience as a light-skinned woman played a part into that? You know, what role in general do you think it played in it? Because I feel like that adds another layer of complexity.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
That is such a great question. Shout out to Stephanie.
Right.
Yeah, colorism. For those of you who aren't aware of what colorism is, it is the favoring of those who are lighter skinned over those who are darker skinned within the Black community. So we have like racism at large, and then we have colorism that happens within Black and brown communities. So with that, I thought that was interesting when she said that. She was like, I believe that. And that was my biggest regret. And I mean, I think that for myself, I found myself in situations where I was trusting of the environments that I was in. And that's when you just first enter the workplace. You're trusting because you're impressionable and it's your first time in these environments, and you don't necessarily have that full understanding of how microaggression work. At least for me, I didn't. I grew up in New York City. You know, New York is super diverse. I didn't have to deal with microaggressions because everyone was Black or brown in the communities that I grew up in. And then I went to Howard, and of course you have like some hints of colorism in that space, but I wasn't really like fighting and dealing with that. But then when I went to the workplace, I've had experiences that were like, okay, noted, HR is actually not your friend. That's how they present, but they work for finance.
The moment when you realize, first of all, the role of HR, right? In that, okay, this is different from how I understand your role to be. And it's so interesting that you point out that you weren't, you get a different understanding the more you experience the different environments you're in terms of microaggressions, and ones that will be unique to you and unique to your work experience. But what's funny is like when you say that, and I think about my first experience with like professional microaggressions, I thought I would be more prepared for them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
the fact that you said professional microaggression, because it's a brand. There's a whole like brand to a professional microaggression.
I consider that one that happened in the workplace. That's the super general, like.
Yeah, because the way passive aggressiveness, right? The way people maneuver, like the emails. Listen,
emails, the different, most definitely. And it seems like Meghan had a serious case of, and I feel like to even call them microaggressions would be to minimize.
So I'm curious for you, why did you name this? Like, let's talk about how this relates to Black women in the workplace.
You know what? I was thinking about my reactions to this interview, because another layer of, I think, the viewing experience, like for me, is that this is building, what's that thing called? In plots, the building action, and this is like the climax to a lot of things we've been waiting on. Like, like you said, racism is so institutionalized in, the monarchy in the UK and all of that, that it was kind of like a no-brainer that she would come up against some ridiculousness. That doesn't make the harm less hurtful and, less hard to watch, you know what I'm saying? And less hard to hear her recount with Oprah and her husband pregnant, which is, I was like, oh my God, I wonder what went into that thought. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just think about looking at it from that lens, like we knew terrible things would happen in the media. I think, at least I did. But just hearing her recount it was so interesting. But I think I named it this is because I was looking at your reaction. I was thinking about that, about how we kind of expected, let me see for myself. I expected some horrible things for her to experience and hear about, and when she said, my biggest regret was believing that they would protect me. I was like, oh, that tracks to how I would assume you would, all these things were kind of like, okay, this tracks. You know what I'm saying? But I named it that because, one of the things you mentioned is that there's a big metaphor for institutional racism. There's a lot of parallels to her experience, what we've experienced. You know what I'm saying? In her lives and her discussions of being silent, I think can obviously go deeper for Black women, but for women in general. I think is a thing. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because it doesn't matter, if you're a duchess or, what I'm saying?
Oprah herself. Oprah has been profiled shopping before. Yeah,
it doesn't matter. They don't care. I think Amanda Gorman, the laureate poet, that she just recounted an experience a couple of weeks ago about a doorman following her to her apartment. She had to flash her keys and be like, hey, I actually live here. I'm a resident. And she I think she noticed, I think the quote, I have to look it up and confirm, I think she said one day you could be a legend, the other day, a threat. And I was like,
yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to talk about all these different points of the interview. And you know what I'm saying? And again, there are just so many parallels. And I thought about you specifically too, probably because I know with the Sadie Collective, and you spoke about this on your last speaking engagement that I tuned into, which I thought, I was like, look at my friend. But anyway, you spoke about the need for stepping up and filling a gap for people who were not speaking up or advocating or recognizing at the basic human level what Black people or people of color were going through this summer. And how, that in addition to the pandemic and all the harmful things we were seeing. How do you bring this up to your people when you're not being, you know what I'm saying? That you're huge part of you was grieving, huge part of you was trying to process what's happening. All these things. So anyway, that's kind of why I named it that. And I knew you had like a very specific experience to speak to in terms of providing a voice to those who may feel like they're silenced or can't speak up.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you titled it that, because there are so many parallels. I 100% agree with you. And just the language itself was triggering. And watching it, I was just like, oh my gosh. So
it was triggering.
The whole thing, because the firm, the institution, we know what that is.
Even that being the name.
We know that they don't have your back. They don't have your back, right?
How
When
is
it
that
comes to the bottom line and focusing on profits, and who cares if you're a frontline worker, like you're going to continue to come into work without paid sick leave. There's all of that goes into what your day-to-day experience is going to be like, especially as a woman of color in America. So yeah, hearing the terms firm, institution, Harry having to write that letter to his dad to put in words, put in writing, right? That's like, that definitely took me back to a manager who was very passive aggressive. So white female manager that I had who was incredibly passive aggressive once I shared my notice for leaving 2 months ahead of time. I was just like following the rules. In hindsight, like maybe 2 weeks notice was best. But I was following the rules. That's what HR asked me to do.
Right.
And she started being extremely passive aggressive and even said things that I apparently did that did not actually happen, similar to what Kate was doing with Meghan. Of course, we weren't there, but my stance is to believe Black women because we don't always do that, right? We don't always vouch for Black women in society. So to hear that Meghan was the one who was actually made to cry versus what the media was saying. The media was saying that Kate was made to cry by Meghan. That just took me, it was triggering. It took me back to my manager accusing me of doing things that I did not do. And in fact, what was crazy for me too is that for that manager in particular that I had, she has done this with other Black women before. And I was fortunate in that HR, the firm, the institution, was familiar with the fact that she has done this before, and HR and the firm was a Black woman, and they had my back.
Right.
Because otherwise, right, this happens all the time. This happens all the time where white women weaponize their tears, right? That's what we saw in the park, in the Central Park, with Cooper, Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper. It's happened throughout history, lynching, etc. And that's what happened in the media with Meghan and Kate. And it's very unfortunate. And I think it's interesting how she was trying to distinguish between the institution and individual experiences. So when she was talking about like Queen and Kate, like, you know, they're cool people, etc. But then there's the reality of the firm and the institution. And it can be nice to your face, but if things aren't happening, if you're not getting resource, if you're not getting the protection that you need, as you're talking about, right? Then
if you are not set up for success,
listen,
and your whole self is not considered, you know, when you're not considered, like, you know, straight up,
right? Yeah.
And your uniqueness is not considered. This is what happened. Like someone said, "Yep, the avocado issue was wild." Yep. Then you get headlines about avocado. Girl, I'm pregnant. I'm trying to eat. I'm not talking about no avocados with y'all.
Talking about she's destroying the world with her eating this avocado. Are you kidding me?
And it's just so blatant. I think that's another aspect that made it very triggering too. It's like it's so lazily obvious, you know what I'm saying?
But it's not to everyone because people really internalize these ideas of Black people. So they don't see
it's obvious.
Can you believe that?
Can you believe that?
I feel like you and we know this because you work in the media space and you are absolutely excellent uplifting Black women entrepreneurs and the work that you do. So you notice these things and these trends, but not the day-to-day person doesn't understand that this is what's happening in such a violent way. So I am glad that it's sparking these conversations, and I'm all about action. So I hope that there is the people who need to have these conversations are having them and that it's helping guide them to a place where they can go to be better allies and be better decision makers.
Be better allies and like stay in it a little bit longer, right? Like, you know, we don't have the choice to really step in and step out as Black women to really, you know, advocate for ourselves. And I think that's something that adds to the infuriation, right? When you're experiencing microaggressions or someone's straight up lying on you in a situation, and a lot of it is because they're internalized, preconceived notions, things to be true about your existence that you come in having to challenge, battle, meet, you know, dismantle, whatever the case, you know. may be. And I forget where I was going with that thought, but one of the things I want to talk about too was let's talk about what it means to protect Black women, right? And like shout
Right.
out to Harry. And I think he also further
Yes.
reinforced like this whole institution thing. Because I think for a lot of Americans
Yes.
too, it's a reminder of how things work in their world and what that looks like. And that's I think a really large parallel that I thought about when looking at your story, like the institution, the powers that be, and like how stifling they can be, or like this false sense of whatever the case may be. For Harry, it sounds like this false sense of freedom that the world seemed to
Yeah.
have. Like,
Oh, I really felt for him. I really felt for him because, like he was saying, history repeats itself, and that's what he was trying to avoid. His mother
yeah.
really struggled with this institution. The institution did not have his mother's back. I spoke to my mom about it because she like was around and conscious when all of this was
Right.
happening with Princess Diana. And she was telling me about how they were terrible with her and giving me some context to Princess Diana and her husband's relationship and whatnot. And yeah, I loved how he talked about how he was trapped and he felt liberated being with Meghan.
Yeah.
And there's so much to that. I have so many thoughts about that.
Really?
But yeah, I do. What did you think about it?
I mean, I'm trying to think of like what was my first like reaction to it, right? Like,
Yeah.
good for you. I also felt like when he shared more about, being awakened, after walking a mile in her shoes, some of the
Right.
prejudices she experiences, and how he was overall a little bit ignorant to those things.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I don't know. It's like
Yeah.
these
So
things are, I respect the journey. I think there's something to be said again, and I think that's like the thing to be said about the entire interview, like the openness, transparency,
mm-hmm.
honesty, the
Mm-hmm.
realness, the mental health conversation, I think was something that a lot of people needed to hear and be reminded of. All those things aside, I was also just like, okay, I don't know. I guess we're privileged to be just kind of out of the loop a bit until
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
liberated, by
Absolutely.
a Black woman. It's
Girl, I am with you. That was my first impression. And that's when
right.
Oprah was like, what you mean you felt trapped? Like,
Yes,
Oprah
you
was
a
like,
prince. You a prince, fella.
girl, yes, exactly. You a whole prince. Get out of here. Tell us more. And then he elaborated, and he was talking about, and he talked about how like the way things are done there, it's also suffocating for those that we perceive as the oppressor. And that's
Yeah.
what I took away from it because I was seeing the whole thing as a metaphor, right? So when it
Yeah.
comes to this idea of meritocracy and like the more you work hard, you're able to get opportunities. When you are enslaved to this mentality in this capitalistic society that we're operating in, you will then internalize that, okay, a 9 to 5 is not enough. I have to like just keep working because the harder you work, the more you get. When the reality is the way wealth is distributed, it's based off of what you inherit. Like
Right.
that's what is the key determining factor for how much wealth you're going to have. Yes,
Right.
you can work hard and get an education, and that will allow you to have some kind of economic mobility. But we don't operate in a meritocracy, actually.
Right.
We're operating based off of generational wealth in the society right now, right? So we have people who have billions of dollars, and that billions of dollars is going to get passed on, and inequality will continue to persist. So when he said that, that's what was coming up for me. This idea of like these people and in the structures that they're operating in, they like to be an oppressor, you're not completely free.
Because you have to buy into
Your whole humanity isn't being honored. If you have to dehumanize someone else for you to feel human, then you're not being able to live to your full potential. So
you're stuck to that. You're stuck to that ideology because that's that contributes to your wealth and your ability to protect your people and protect yourself. So it's gonna be harder to like, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like there needs to be an other for you to feel like you're a boss or you're doing something with yourself. So yeah, that was fascinating. That's something that, yeah, it's not worth that much of our time. Like, there's still a lot more to get to around Black women. But I did note that and appreciate Oprah digging deeper. Because at first glance, any Black person hearing that is like, you feel trapped. Like, don't get me started on feeling trapped. You know, any marginalized group, right? Don't get me started on feeling trapped because of the British monarchy. Okay, like,
yeah. Right. Like, let's explore, like you said, like Oprah did. Let's explore. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to see. There's a few people on. I know we'll probably people will trickle on and off. But if anybody else had questions, I guess comment them. Mm-hmm. If you guys have them, I'm like looking through if I missed anything, but I don't think so. Oh, someone said about Oprah's tactics, like she butters them up before asking them hard questions.
She does. She gets you real comfortable.
Yep, you be comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is value to Meghan having had that communications background as well.
Right? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
She was so good. She was
really good.
Yeah. The whole thing. Like really everything from start to finish. Like the little
and I just yeah, and I just think about the pressure of it all and the details she's revealing. And, you know, I also thought about, like, why did they feel the need to maybe come out, you know, and do all this? But you see the dire straits they were under, like,
right.
You know, frankly, how life and death it was. And then, yeah, how Harry was like, no, like, but, like, I see the signs, though. Like, but honestly, this is what's happening. And I can imagine having, like, your real public life, your family, your unborn child being such a big discussion.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
People going to be discussing this for a while. They dropped it at the beginning of the week.
Yep.
Through International Women's Day.
We got a whole year ahead of us. Yeah.
So smart.
So with that, too, all of the personal battles that she was going through and feeling suicidal and being isolated, yeah, like that all speaks to the mental toll of being in these spaces, in these institutions and firms that don't have your back. Ooh. And also the physical toll, because she didn't go too much into this, but she had it sounded like a miscarriage.
Yeah. Right? They glanced right over that. She said, we lost the baby, da-da-da.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not even, she kind of kept going and Oprah kept it moving too.
Yeah. And then no matter how you spin this, because of course there is going to be that skeptical part of us, right? It's on TV, you know, all these ads, whatever. No matter how you spin it though, she wasn't going to be in a winning position.
I mean, if you look at it like that, and if you look at it from another lens in terms of like the types of conversations they've opened up, the kind of, you know, things we're thinking of, you know, and then to a certain extent also I feel, you know, I don't know, but I feel as a public figure, there is some type of obligation you have to just staying in front of your messaging, especially if you're so public and a disruptor, really. Like, they're such public disruptors, like, this is going to go down. I think she had that foresight. I think that's something I thought about, like, there's some level of foresight, you know, and I think I saw some parallels to like that Princess Diana interview. I forget with who, but it was like that legendary interview, and the silhouettes are very similar, you know what I'm saying? And the type of dress, like how it drapes Meghan and how it draped on Diana. And I'm just thinking we're going to be looking at, just like we're looking at Princess Diana's, you know, history and the interviews and everything, the messaging she's put out, is how we're going to look at Meghan. I think she knows that. And I think Harry for sure knows that. And I think it was smart of them to do it in the best way possible. Yeah. And you're right about Oprah being such an integral part to that, right? Like, because she can reach so many audiences. She hopped on with Gayle the next morning to spill more on a national platform. I'm like,
yeah, she did. And
I watched every bit of it.
Shared with Tyler Perry too, also, like, being the host of them. Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. But I agree with you. It was very smart of them to be on top of it and to finally be able to have a say about everything that was happening. Because up until this point, it was just the media in the UK just saying all of these things.
And us speculating and...
Right, yeah. And you know what's fascinating, too, on the metaphor and the aspect of you know, Meghan being American and them running away to the US for their freedom, it was giving me like Boston Tea Party, 13 colonies, like throughout all of the British tea, come to America and like get your freedom. I'm definitely reading too much into it, but I definitely had a thought that was like, oh, this is interesting, right? Because then they end with Archwell is our company that we're starting, and it had like this American capitalist, feel to it. And, you know, leaving the British monarchy to like do our own thing in America, and like Harry no longer feeling trapped. Anyways, I have to.
It all points up for the next step, regardless. And I think it's so smart, and it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to, you know, do that. And they all are very centered throughout the interview. They keep reiterating their connection through their humanitarian work and their nonprofit work and the causes and the very important topics that they bring to the forefront. They kind of kept going back to that, you know, the mental health programming that Harry's developing and their company's developing with Harpo and Oprah's situation. So, I mean, they're doing it, I think, you know, from a public facing, you know, branding point of view, they do what they gotta do. They really
And then oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, when you're such a again, how public they are, they're so famous. Everybody's gonna report everything they do. Like, we're gonna know.
Right. Yeah. And now they have security. Yeah. And
oh my God. Okay. Can we talk about that real quick? Because I know it's 6:10. I'm thinking we can stay on maybe 5-10 more minutes.
Oh yeah,
if you don't have questions or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Was that not so hurtful when Meghan shares, hey, look, they were not going to give him a title, a security, even though his, you know, level of threat has not changed, you know, despite titles and all that. And, you know, we're concerned about his color. I'm like, do you know how racist you have to be concerned about that, you know, that baby's color? You know what I'm saying?
Listen. And I saw the post that you put up about how colorism got her in the door, but it was anti-Blackness that got her out. And I thought that was very, very pointed and nuanced. And I appreciated that take because, wow, yeah, I mean, like your sister was suggesting, the possibility of Prince Harry choosing someone who's a dark-skinned Black woman, like, that's off the table.
It's like not even possible.
Right.
You can't even fathom it. And there's a lot of layers that we could go into about that, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then now we're presented with Meghan, and she's biracial, and they can't stand that.
Oh my God, they hate it.
Stand that to the extent that they don't want her to be a part of the family. Like, actually, everything that they've done to her, I think that was all deliberate, right? To get her to a point to be suicidal. And then now you're concerned about the color of
now, I don't know if it was deliberate. I don't know if anyone from the institution will come out and be like, we deliberately pushed this woman to her limit. So, you know, they won't come out and say that, but it's not like they cared. I definitely don't think they cared either way.
I mean, of course they won't say that, and they won't call themselves racist. Right? They won't call themselves racist, but that's what it is, right? If it was anyone else who wasn't a divorcee, who wasn't a Black woman, who was an American, like, what would the approach be? And then with Harry, again, right? So Princess Diana, and her fiance was an Arab, and like, you know, Britain is in this space of talking about Brexit. Like, there's so much that just aligns with this is how the monarchy operates. So they couldn't provide security for Archie and would not allow him to be a potential successor of the monarchy. Like, that's crazy. They were
different.
Yeah. So of course they're not going to call themselves racist, but they are.
No. And again, it all reinforced the notions I had about the institution and the monarchy and how the confines of it. But just to hear it, it doesn't make it less, you know, hurtful and just like, you know, it's really, I don't know. The baby though, that was why I read. I'm like, the baby? His name, the baby?
So the thing is, like, not that I would ever be in this position to advise the colonizer But like, if they went about this right, they could have really LOL
They
at
could
right,
have.
right? So going
Yeah.
about this right would be you accept Meghan, you allow her to represent the possibilities for Black people to aspire to be a part of the monarchy, and then you continue to have a stronghold over these nations that are still a part of your commonwealth and that the queen is still the head of state of, like Barbados, like Antigua and Barbuda.
Yeah.
They still have these colonies,
Yeah.
right? So that's an approach that they could have taken, but they have no foresight, and their racism couldn't allow them.
Their racism clouded like all of that.
Right.
And it's like they couldn't even get past, you know, that part of her existence.
And then the colorism lens that we're talking about, right? We're talking about the fact that she's biracial and they're concerned with color. And for us, it's like
I have to be, you know, if I'm being frank, I think when the story first came on the scene, I guess a couple years ago, whenever we all started hearing about it, I didn't know Meghan Markle was biracial at all until someone mentioned it. I was like, oh my gosh, you know what I'm saying? So it, you know, it wasn't
right.
You know, I don't know. They're really obsessed about that, most definitely, and it's not surprising, but it is still hurtful.
Yeah.
Girl, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot in that, and I do wonder. And this is aside. I just want to know how Tyler Perry got in the mix. Like, I want to know who connected to him. Like, did he reach out? Like,
yes, I'd be so curious too. To his home in Canada, right?
I don't know. I think in the U.S. I'm assuming L.A. and gave them security, and the fact that they took away Prince Harry's security too. I was like, oh my gosh, they really And you're right, it was a big missed opportunity. If we're gonna reduce this to, you know, positioning and how they could have leveraged this to just, you know, transform their profile. Huge missed opportunity.
Right.
That's a shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a shame.
But it's also time for like the queen and the monarchy to go. Like if anything is more telling of it, it's like, why is this still a conversation? Do you watch Bridgerton? I see somebody mention Bridgerton or like The Crown.
Oh my God, I did watch. Did you watch it?
No, I'm not.
Bridgerton was really good.
Okay.
Bridgerton was pretty good. I mean, you know what? No, actually, let me I was like, there are different layers to that conversation as well. But in terms of like a drama, something to watch on Netflix, it was a really good show. I really enjoyed it. Okay. But it is going to be interesting. They desired to have a colorblind casting, race-blind casting, kind of giving you, you know, Roger and Hammerstein, Cinderella feel. Doesn't matter what people's race are. That's how they promoted the programming and promoted the you know. But then we get into it, and racial, you know, socioeconomic structures are there, and they touch on it a little bit, but they don't. I don't know. It was weird. They were operating in this middle ground of, yes, we're race blind, but also we're going to bring up the fact that, you know, we know that, you know, Black monarchy couldn't happen unless someone was in love and all this other stuff. And then they also, you know, enforced some really stereotypical Black woman tropes. And, you know, none of the Black women in the show had romance. One passed away from maternity. I said, oh, Lord. Another one had a child out of wedlock. I said, oh, Jesus. So even if they were trying to be, like, more inclusive, they
did all the Black people dirty.
They missed a few marks. So, you know, but, you know, if you're just looking for something entertaining, it was cool. And then now this makes me want to get into The Crown. I haven't been into The Crown too much, but obviously, watch all the documentaries. Might as well get into the Netflix show.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So they did all the Black people dirty. Exactly.
Yeah, I think I'll look more into Princess Diana's life. It's been fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating. It really is. And I can imagine, and another thing that I found, and as we wrap here, like about the interview that was interesting was just the lengths they'll go into tracking you and making you a part of the news. How she says they don't report on the news, they create the news, they hold information, they release it strategically. They, you know what I'm saying? They do what they got to do to ensure that, and it's so deliberate that it even underscores even more how little they thought of her, you know, and her well-being and all of all of that. So
Mm.
yeah, I thought that was when they said they tracked down her mom, her dad, moved in across the street. I
Yeah,
was like, oh my God.
yeah, that was wild. Yeah.
They do a very good job, the UK media, of doing what they got to do what they want to do. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was an interesting point.
Yeah. Are you catching some of these comments?
Yeah, what do you see? Love Diana. She has an interview on Netflix. Oh, I'm gonna watch that.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go check that out too. Yeah. We fantasize the monarchy so much, but they could care less about us. They probably thought Bridgerton was blasphemous. That's real. Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care, and they don't care about you if you're associated with a person of, you know what I'm saying? Like the fact they
Right.
don't care about Harry. They said, go ahead on.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, so on the bright side, what do we see nations doing? Barbados is currently working on no longer having the queen be the head of state. Love to see that.
Love to see that.
Because they still have colonies. They still
Yeah.
have colonies, and that includes like Antigua and Barbuda. I believe Jamaica is also working on no longer having them as the queen being the head of state.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though she doesn't have that much power legislatively, she does as an influencer. And
Yeah, the figurehead is so important, as we can see.
Right.
Like what they stand for as an influencer, like you said, you can see. And obviously there's an outpouring of support, you know, for Meghan and Harry. Like, we love them here. Like,
Yeah.
for them. We're gonna see what happens, and we're gonna keep talking about this for the rest of the week. I mean, like I said, I can't. You know, the timing was impeccable.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, most definitely.
Oh, true. Priestley said Jamaica is independent. That's awesome. Yes. Yeah. Whew, man.
Girl. So I'm gonna let you go. It's 6:20, but I so
I
appreciated
got
you.
until 6:30. I can do it till 6:30.
You did it.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Priestley, you make a good point. One of the things Priestley points out was that, you know, and I pointed this during the interview, they kept, you know, or they always referred to her as biracial, 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 biracial. They never explicitly said black as a black woman. They kept her identity biracial, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And that's probably why Harry was so shocked. Because he probably saw himself marrying someone who is biracial. And then they just realized she's she's non-white, and wow, they were just, and now they have questions. What color will your son be? Like,
that's crazy. That's wild, but I'm not surprised. And my mom made a good point too. I was talking to her earlier. She was like, you know, I hope this opens conversations for us to check our own biases too, because it's not uncommon for the Black community to be checking for the complexion of their babies, and, you know, looking at babies' ears when they, you know, when they're born, to be like, okay, what's their color gonna be like? Okay, and really commenting on the things that we as a Black community are guilty of as well when it comes to colorism and the biases, unchecked biases there. It was not oblivious. Oh, the Queen's statement. I didn't read the Queen's statement. Did we talk about the Queen's statement? Did you see her release a statement?
I did see her release a statement about COVID, but not specific to this.
Not COVID. Girl, you have another virus to talk about.
Right. Let's talk about the racism that's out here.
Ooh,
yeah,
okay.
So this was really just the tip of the iceberg, right? When we're talking about what Black women's realities are.
Yes, hopefully it gave some insight to the realities of what Black men have to go through on a day-to-day. Because, like, they just released the statement 2 hours ago talking about something we're saddened by.
Okay.
The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken seriously and will be addressed in the family privately.
Will they? Okay, then. All right.
And Harry, Meghan, and Archie will be much loved family members. Okay.
All right, then.
I think it's so weird. Like, why did they wait so long? And let's not talk about, you know what I'm saying? Like, they knew the interview was coming just as we did. Meghan pointed to the fact that they have a whole team that flag press that's about to come out to potentially intercept it if needed, which they did not do at any point
right.
for our girl Meghan or whatever. So they knew this was coming. And, you know, I don't know if you thought this, but a lot of people were saying that the news that broke just a few days before their interview about Meghan Markle being sued by the institution, or at least some charges up against her based on how she bullied and treated her staff. And people thought it was funny how they kind of came out with the quote unquote, you know, smear campaign before she goes on this interview where they knew some tea, some royal tea.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon, right? Like, yeah, it's not uncommon. That it has me thinking about the whole situation with Google.
I was going to say the Google situation.
Timnit Gebru, and how she is someone who's focused on ethical algorithms, and Google is acting like they champion this. And
yes,
when they have a moment where they can fire her, they do, right?
And they tell other people that she decided to leave and paint a more amicable picture, which we can assume further enraged this Black woman researcher. Like, and that's the part of microaggressions and this you know, this unchecked bias that is even more infuriating. It's like, do you not? Am I not here? You know what I'm saying? And I suppose not. You get that confirmation, like.
Yeah, and so the reality is as well that for a long time there are people who've been trapped in these institutions, and she got to the point of suicide, right? And there are some people who get to that point, whether it's physical or not, right? Suicide isn't always a physical act. It's also just like how you die to yourself to be something else.
And she talks about that loneliness too that she felt, and that just detachment, you know, overall. You're right about that. It's not always physical.
Right. Yeah. And then on the flip side too, Black people have left institutions that have not been for them in the past too, and we don't talk about that enough as well. So resistance is a part of us. It's a part of the Black experience, and we have to hold on to that and know that we're powerful and we have that in us. And it brings me to this quote from Dr. Julian Malveaux, amazing Black economist who was at our conference this year at the Sadie Collective Conference. And she was saying that know who you are and know whose you are. Like, really know that and sit with that, because as you navigate these institutions, these firms, people will try to silence you, right? They will try to silence you. They'll try to do all these things that will make it hard for you to operate in that space. But when you know who you are and whose you are able to come out stronger. And she didn't allow herself to be to commit that suicide, whether physically or on a more shallow level. And that's because she had that experience of her being an entrepreneur, of being a divorcee, and like
in Hollywood,
and making her own. And she knew that she had that ability to walk away, because she had those experiences where she had to really fight. So that was a takeaway, and it was sad to kind of hear her say about when it comes to this concept of women's rights and feeling like she wasn't embodying that, because that's also real. That
feeling that pressure or that weight and responsibility and recognizing it, because that's real too. And it makes me, as you were speaking, think of like this idea of the strong Black woman. We hear about that. We've been talking about that a lot, I feel like, the past year, and you know, with even a lot more, like more pop culture references, like Megan Thee Stallion and protecting Black women. These are themes that we've been exploring and seeing show up in different ways. And when they were talking about, although she was struggling so severely and had those suicidal thoughts, how they still had to pony up and put a face forward. And all of those things, that just broke my heart, because you know this too, as a woman building her career and just out here trying to get it. You know, it's nothing worse than having to do something and you know you do not want to do it. You are not ready. And my emotional self, I just can't. I don't know if that's called strength. We say it's strength, but I think it's you know what I'm saying? But I think it's something else. Like, there could be another way to describe it, because yes, it's a part of it, but that shouldn't always be the case.
Right.
And it's just not fair. It feels like Black women have to do that a lot more often. And I think going back to the letter that you drafted over the summer, when the whole world seemed to be waking up to racism again, having done a
Right.
wake-up call and having to pony up, right, and get online and still try to earn your money at your job was
Yeah.
really hard. And then also having to speak on behalf, of your experience and exist, all these other things. So, I can imagine,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
whole nother level.
Absolutely.
Whole
Yeah.
nother level. Shout out to Harry for having and Meghan for having that leadership and the faith to step out and like
Yeah.
do their own thing, challenge a hundreds old traditional monarchy
Yes.
rooted in racism, like the title says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Kudos to
everybody
her
give
for
it
that.
close.
And it's continuing a tradition that's been around for centuries of
Yeah.
Black women resisting. And yeah, and it kind of sucks to kind of have to feel like that's just where we have to sit and live in the
Yeah.
space of resistance. So yeah, shout out to the content creators like Issa Rae who have us
Yeah.
just like not necessarily reflecting deeply about the struggles and appreciating the nuances of our experiences outside of it being, thinking about race and thinking about all that comes with that and thinking about friendships and like just all
Yeah.
these other parts of our lives that keep us whole and that keep us who we are and rooted and
Yeah.
just joyful and still being able to carry on. Yeah.
Exactly. And going beyond what folks think, it means to be a Black woman in our experience. Like you said, nuance is the key word here.
Yes.
Nuance. Oh
Yes.
my gosh. This was awesome. This was really good for the soul. Good way to start the week. Because we are only in Tuesday. I'm like, what day is it?
It is only Tuesday. Oh my God. I have papers to write and
Ooh.
yes, they need to be finished tonight. So
Yes, girl. Shout out where to follow you and all that.
oh, sure. Y'all can follow me at the Fanta Traore on Twitter and also on Instagram. I did want to share one last thing because I thought that was also something that came out for me. The fact that Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. And we've been seeing that like over the past like
Since
decade.
2018 at least,
Mm-hmm.
when the data came out. Yeah.
Yes. And like,
At least.
this also ties to this idea of resistance and not just fitting into the firm and doing your own thing. And
Yeah, because a lot of women, but Black women in particular, create their businesses and start their entrepreneurial pursuits because of things that were missing in their lives. Institutions that would not accept them. It made it really difficult for them to thrive and build the things that they need. So I think those things are linked most definitely. The rate of entrepreneurship, some of these challenges that we talked about today, but also obviously opportunities. It's awesome to be in the space of other women entrepreneurs and go-getters.
yes, I see you out here, Rachel. Constantly, just so smooth and quick with it, giving us the updates. Sabrina and I were chatting about how we feel like you may have seen Coming to America already, but we're still going to suggest it to you. So I'm looking forward to that. We can catch up.
Oh, yes, I have to confirm the best time, but I'm here for it. We're going to get into it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you, friend.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank you. And I'm excited. I'll post this tomorrow whenever I get the recording. But thank you, Fanta.
This was so much fun. Have a great night.
Love you. See you later.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.